Welcome to In Touch Crime Beat. I'm Officer Don with Fayette Commonwealth's Attorney Ray Larson. This week we're going to start off featuring a case that, this could be a crime novel. You can't make this stuff up. It's a case where a police lieutenant commits a murder, and then he tries to actually feign an investigation, set somebody else up for the crime, and then of course he gets what's coming to him years later. A happy ending, at least from a justice standpoint. Mm-hmm. Tell me about this case. It's the first I heard of this when you came in here and started talking about it today, but it really sounds like one of those cases that someone would make up for a crime novel.
In 1987, a young woman by the name of Karina Mullen was found in the trunk of her car, naked. It was parked in a city garage. She had been, it turns out, had been raped. She was stabbed numerous times. Her throat was slit, and this guy, Billy Fields, was a lieutenant with the Central City Police Department. That's in Muhlenberg County. That's down in the southwest part.
It's not far from, I'm from Breckenridge County, so it's right close to us.
That explains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So at any rate, this guy was a lieutenant with the police department. Turns out that Karina Mullen had gotten herself in a little bit of trouble and was working off a fine by working at the police department. Okay. And that's where this Fields guy, Lieutenant Fields of the police department, had met her. Turns out that they had started having sex, basically.
Was he married?
I don't know. Okay. But so what happens is she was found. Her body was found, and who was the investigator of the homicide, rape, kidnapping charges? Case, but none other than this guy that ultimately committed the crime. So what happens is that it was a lousy investigation. They didn't send stuff off to the crime lab and that sort of thing.
Now, when you say send stuff off to the crime lab, she was raped. There was physical evidence there. We do what's called a perk kit when someone is sexually assaulted, which allows us to gather any semen or bodily fluids or pubic hairs or any kind of evidence that you send off to the crime lab, and then they try to come up with a match if you have a suspect.
That's right.
So no physical evidence was sent off to the crime lab.
That's right. And they ultimately charged, this Fields guy ultimately charged this Karina Mullen's boyfriend. And there wasn't any evidence of his guilt. But he testified, I guess this guy testified in front of the grand jury, and the boyfriend was charged. He was tried by a jury in Muhlenberg County in 1988, I think, and was found not guilty, of course, thank goodness. So 20 years later, fast forward to 2006, a young, well, she wasn't as young then, 20 years later, a witness came forward who said she had really seen who had committed the crime and identified the three people that were involved. Now, at the time, back in 1987, this witness was 16 years old. And this Billy Fields and another person saw her walking along, put her in the back seat of the cruiser, and went over to Karina Mullen's apartment. And this 16-year-old witnessed things that were going on, witnessed going back into the Karina Mullen's and Billy Fields going back into a bedroom, and she heard a lot of things, saw a lot of things, and so it was.
So this guy picks this 16-year-old up in the back in his cruiser, goes over to this,
takes that young woman with her,
woman's house, and then murders her in the bedroom while the 16-year-old is there.
Yeah. then the couple of guys that are with, or the guy that's with him, end up taking the body out, trying to put it in the back seat of her car. They couldn't get that accomplished, so they put her in the trunk. Well, now then there was blood on the back seat of the car, and that sort of thing.
But now, was this car ever found?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that's where her body was found.
So 20 years later, they found. Oh, okay, I got you. They put her in her car. They put the victim in the victim's car and then drove her somewhere and then abandoned the car, left.
Yeah. Well, they had the serology, the blood evidence that indicated that was her blood on the back seat and in the trunk, because that's where she was.
Yeah, of her car.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, 20 years later, this young woman at the time of the murder came forward. Now, you know as well as I do, probably better than I do. That's hard for me to say, but she came forward, and she was at that time, 35, 36, 37 years old. And she came forward and had information about this stabbing, slit throat, all of that sort of thing that nobody else would have known. She had information about the crime. Now tell me, as a homicide investigator, first of all, do the police always release all the information about a case?
No, we don't, and there's a reason for that. Because you want to leave, especially when you have an unsolved murder, you need to be able to release enough information when it's a cold case to keep people interested, to keep the media talking about it. And really, sometimes the only way to encourage them to talk about it is to release information in bits and pieces. But you have to be careful as the investigator not to release all the intimate details, because someday you may have a witness like this young lady that comes along and says, look, I was there and I know what happened. And when I walk up to the prosecutor and I walk into your office and I say, Mr. Larson, I think we know who committed this murder 20 years ago. You're going to go, really? Well, why do you know that? I'm going to say, well, we have a witness. Okay, you got a witness 20 years ago who says that she saw something when she was 16 years old and she's just now coming forward, and you want me to take that to a jury and convince the jury that this witness has credibility? I don't think so. Won't you go out and show me why you believe this witness? And of course, an investigator has to do that. One of the ways we do that is we sit down and we ask this person, okay, what exactly did you see? And you said something that was key right there. You said that first they took the body and they put it in the back seat of the car. Then they moved it to the trunk. Now, I bet you that was a key detail that made people believe that this girl was actually there, because lo and behold, when they did the serology test, when they swabbed the back seat and they discovered the body had been there first and then put in the trunk, that's probably not a detail that was released to the media. So when the 16-year-old girl said, that's what happened, I was there 20 years ago, and the detectives were able to go back and confirm that in fact there was evidence the body was first in that back seat, then that's when you got the first star. And you said, oh, you know what? This girl may actually have been there. So give me another detail. And so you just spend your time tracking down these details.
Corroborate.
Yeah, to corroborate that. And ultimately, your job as the investigator is to first prove to yourself as the investigator that this is the person that did it. You have to do that, because you can't in good faith take a case up to a prosecutor if you don't at least believe the person could have committed the crime. Then you have to convince the prosecutor that not only did the person commit the crime, that you can bring them enough evidence that they can take the case to court and prove it. And then, of course, from there the prosecutor makes that decision and says, okay, I think I can take this to a jury. I believe that he did this, and I believe that the jury will believe it too. Because you only have one shot, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. You don't want to take a murder case to court when you've got an 80% probability of a conviction, because if the person isn't convicted, it's over. There's not another opportunity. And in particularly in a case like this, what you've often told me in these cold cases is, look, it's been sitting here 20 years. You're 80% there, Don. I'm going to need that other 20%. It's, you know what? What's a couple more years going to hurt? Let's get this solved, but let's make sure that we do it right. That's what an investigator has to face when you bring a case like this before a prosecutor and you're trying to get this person convicted of a crime.
Well,
tune in to the following stations every Sunday to hear full episodes of In Touch with Ray the DA and Don Evans.